Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to The What Life. I've been looking at the Zwift Academy races from last week, but I didn't get a chance to do it because I had a couple of meltdowns in some races, so I thought I'd try and get it in tonight, which is Monday, and I saw that there were really solid numbers. You have a quick look, there's 213 people signed up to this Cat B race 1 for the Zwift Academy. If you've been doing the Academy workouts, if you've been doing the long workouts, you'll realise just how brutal they are. I've done the first 3 workouts. I'm now doing the race. I'm only going to give these races, it's one and done for the races. I'll do race 1 and I'll do race 2. But what I'll do is, I've done the first 3 workouts, which are really, really hard. I'm not used to doing, if you do the long workouts, they're an hour and a half. The start of this race, just as a FYI, didn't go out too crazy hot, but there's just so many numbers that I got the impression that you're not going to get a breakaway off the start line. So it went out hard, it went out fast. This is a hot race, obviously such big numbers. And Scotland's one of my favourite maps because it is slightly more rolling. So even with 200 odd riders, there's still the odd chance for it to break up. You've got to put your kicks in and you've got to choose when to punch to try and stay with the group. And there's definitely a few moments where the dynamic of the race changes, but we'll go through that in a second. So I've done the first 3 Academy workouts. I've done the long version each time. Each time they've absolutely destroyed me. About an hour and a half or 80 to 90 minutes each one. Trying to fit those in with a couple of Zwift races a week was really hard. So last week I had a couple of meltdowns, Monday, Tuesday, doing some racing. So I thought, take an easy week, come back and see if we can kind of improve and feel better and get more done. Now, so this is the first time I had 4 days where I haven't really done a huge amount. A little YouTube video that I popped up the other day about doing a 3-minute effort, but I wouldn't necessarily call that taking myself into any sort of hard and fast intensity workout. Just a short 3-minute burst up a hill locally, and there's a fun little YouTube on that. But coming back to this, the nice thing was my heart rate is bounced back. I'm getting it up into the 170s again. I'm holding a high 160 during races. Things that, for me, I identify with feeling rested, recovered, and strong. Sometimes I come into races and I struggle to get my heart rate into the high 160s, and then I know that I'm I've got heart rate fatigue, neuromuscular fatigue, and I'm just not really putting out my best effort. But also saying that, it is always a funny one, guys. When you take 5 days of real low intensity, not really doing much, just trying to tick things over. That first race back's a bit of a shock to the system, hey? Don't know whether you guys feel the same way, but you take 4 or 5 days off, you come back. That first one, it does take a bit of a, it just feels like a kick to punch to the throat, if anything. But so anyway, diving into the race. There was a long lead-in on this, right? So a real long lead-in. Let me give you some stats for the race. We're doing Cat B, so it's a double loop. Some of the other categories, Cat C, Cat D, do a single loop, and they do 8.7 miles. We are doing 14 miles, 14 and a half miles. This is the first time up Breakaway Bray, and we've obviously got a massive group going up this time. I knew, positioning-wise, that you don't have to be at the tip of the spear, so to speak. That's never really my position. But you do have to certainly be not too far behind, because if a break does happen and some guys take the bit between the teeth and kick on, you can get dusted quite easily. And that's basically what happens over the course of this race. Is we basically drop 5-7 riders continually over all the different variations of terrain through the Scotland map. And this is why I love Scotland, because it's not flat. It's you get these little kicks, you get these little bursts, and to start with 200, and you can see how much it's strung out just off that first charge up breakaway. But so this is the thing, interestingly enough, to give you numbers, actual physical numbers from the race, I held 3.8 watts, 287 watts, which is normalized 294 for the race, 23k. That's 3.8 watts for this race, normalized to 294. So I'm not quite hit my 4 watts per kg mark yet. That I've been that's what I'm working to get these kind of races. Certainly these 15 to 25k races. I want to try and get that up to 4 watts per kg, and that would be a very solid progression. But position-wise, you can see that we have we create this tiny little kind of breakaway group, if you will, but the group behind us is so big that you just always get the feeling they're going to come back, even though that group behind is so strung out. There's so many riders in a 216 person race that everyone's kind of sat on the wheel, and the dynamics within Zwift for people to basically sit in drafts just brings us all back together. So this was, you got to remember that there's a long lead in, then we're doing 2 loops. So I'll give you some stats from, like I said, from the race. Just a reminder, I did 3.8 watts for the race. The winner of this race does 3.6 watts, and he's heavier than me. So I'm 70. Sorry, he's not heavier than me. I'm 76.2. He's 75 kg. He holds 3.6 watts per kg. So just someone that's basically able to sit a bit more within there. And I obviously don't know this guy. I'm just presuming that he is able to put out comfortable wattage to sit in the group and kind of move and maneuver his position so that he's continually in the draft, and he's very economical with it, and then obviously probably puts in a very good sprint towards the finish, which takes him to that win. Now, if anyone has ridden the Scotland mats before, this is the Rolling Highlands route. And the Rolling Highlands route is 5.5 miles, so just under 10k each time. And it finishes with a kick up and around the castle, and then a few minutes later, you're back to doing Breakaway Bray. So it is an aggressive finish. Obviously, Breakaway Bray itself is an uphill climb, and we've done that one time. Some stats on that. My first ride up Breakaway Bray, which we've seen, which was on the lead-in, which basically the start of the actual loop 1, I did in 56 seconds, holding 388 watts. And then the second time on the first lap, I do it again in 56 seconds, holding 370 watts. Obviously, power-ups make a little bit of difference. I actually don't manage to kind of hold on. I didn't have a power-up for the first time I did it. But getting an understanding of the course, you kind of realize the points at which it's worth trying to hold on to a power-up. So effectively, the second 2 times, or the last 2 times I do the Breakaway Bray, I do actually hold on to a power-up. This is an interesting part of the race because some guys basically decide to kick on, and they kick on hard. And you can see my heart rate just builds up a little bit. But it does create a little bit of separation in the group. So that big number that was probably like over 100 riders is now getting dwindled down. And I say dwindled loosely because I still think there's like 70 odd riders in our front group once we all come back together. But these little kickaways just create just enough separation. Now keep an eye on the mini-map top right. You can see that it just creates enough separation to kind of wear down some of the riders that perhaps can't hold on, and you just see that tiny bit of separation. Once you've lost that wheel and you fall off, kind of that becomes an actual break, and then we are dropping 5 or 6 riders, what might be 4, 5, 6 riders at a time, and that kind of happens continually throughout the race. So it was always in your best interest, if you knew where the climbs were, you knew where the little hills are, to be in a good position for that. And this is certainly one of them. When you come down to the castle, and this is like a pivotal point, because obviously you need to hold on to the front group doing this little castle climb. Guys, apologies, I don't know the actual name for it, but it's this little loop round that you do. You need to kick in hard. Now you've got your decision here is, from a racing perspective, is you can either drop your power up now and then not have a power up for when you do Breakaway Bray and effectively the finish line. That's basically the decision that you are making. You either drop your power up now to stay with the front group and use it to try and hold on to that front group, or you try and save it for when you do the Breakaway Bray, which is a minute or so even after this, and then use that to cross the line. Now, the first time I did this, obviously, guys, I'm not like, as much as I do love Zwift and I love making videos, I'm not a Zwift aficionado on all the routes just yet, all the courses. So once I'd done lap 1, I realized, obviously, we're going to do lap 2. I was like, okay, well, if I can ride that castle climb without using my power up on my second lap, the last lap that we're doing, then I can effectively save a cheeky power up for the finish. And that was kind of going to be my tactic, kind of see how I was feeling on that castle climb before getting into Breakaway Bray, because this is the little tiny recovery section you get between that climb and then the next climb, and it's not a huge amount. Even though the watts come off a little bit and the groups come back together, it strings out, and this is what's going to kind of break the group up. So you have to recognize that. And guys, we're obviously in a academy race and everyone's wearing the same kit, so it's super hard to identify who is who and how people are riding. But at the same time, you want your position to be good, so you want to make sure. Did someone just see a rider go the opposite direction? Is that what just happened? You want to be in a good position. This is breakaway Bray. On the second lap, the second time I do this, again, 56 seconds, holding 370 watts average. So not crazy, but, it's definitely hurting. And I know that you kind of want to be with the front guys, or you certainly, like I said, you don't need to be the tip of the spear, but you certainly want to be up the front. Some of the guys have saved their power up that they haven't used on the castle climb to use and come through now. Obviously, once you go through the start finish, you should get another power up, but that takes us into what is effectively the second lap, and then we have to do it all over again. But it just shows how tough and hard this finish line was going to be. That's what I realized coming up to this. I was like, oh god, this is going to be a tough finish if it's like this. If it goes castle climb, little recovery, breakaway Bray, and then obviously there's the start finish line that will be the point that we have to get through on the next lap, which is going to be, that's a tough uphill sprint finish, and that's not my forte, guys. I don't have the medium, the that power. My average power isn't quite high enough to sit comfortably and then still kick up an uphill sprint finish. The only time I can really try and work a sprint finish is when that power feels slightly more comfortable, and then I can go from there. If I'm overworked before we get to the sprint, I've got no chance. But luckily, guys, we're all in the same boat, and tons of other people have got the same problem, because when it comes to that, loads of people don't get to put in a sprint finish because they're as jazzed as I am. Everyone's quite ballsed. So we dive into the second lap, and the first lap on Rolling Highlands, for me, I did in 12 minutes 08, holding 290 watts. Now, this second lap, I think the group obviously dwindles down, slightly less people. We do this in 12:17. So again, first lap was 12:08, second lap was 12:17. And our time up breakaway Bray is obviously faster because it's part of the sprint finish. So that's quite interesting that, the first lap we do is just hot. The second lap just slightly slower, not a huge amount, 9 seconds, but holding 200, I averaged 279 watts for my second time round for that 12:17. That's interesting. Obviously, I think, luckily, it's so easy to go into these races and just presume that other people aren't suffering. And this one really hurt me. And from a personal point, I've struggled, with a bit of a stitch. I've been doing some of these, 30-minute 30-minute races last week. And I got a bit of a stitch. I'm not sure whether, I don't know. And I was struggling a bit with that today as well. Just trying to, really focus on breathing and the depth of my breath, and not that short, sharp panic breathing. I wanted to try and relax a little bit, or I was really trying to relax going into this bit, because I was like, right, I'm feeling this like stitch coming on. I just need to basically try and measure my heart rate. But all in all, we now have a pretty good front pack of what is maybe 60 riders. And guys, it's crazy that there's this number of riders in a Cat B race. But from my point of view, we've gone through 25 minutes. We have just under 4k, just over 4k, I guess, to go. And I'm still in it, and that is for me quite encouraging. But I do realise that we have these two little kickers or climbs to go, and they are going to be the challenging bit for me, because obviously you now have no option. If the group goes or the guys at the front go, you basically have to go and try and stay with them. Otherwise, it's basically game over. So a little bit of a recovery down here. Positioning for the climb is very important. So if you can kind of get in a good position, which is what I try my best to do, which is move forward a little bit, but then it kind of just kicks in. Right, so it's go time. Decision time on whether you use your power up or not. Some people obviously do to stay with the group, keep moving. I decided that I was going to try my best to do this climb without using my power up. The idea behind it being okay, if I can kick in and touching 625 watts up there for a little bit, for a fraction of a second, But this keeps me with the front group-ish. And again, the hard thing is obviously riding off the top. It's easy to put a little kick in, but then you got to dig in and just try and hold your wattage. A lot of the time you want to put a kick in and then just like collapse and stop spinning, but that's not an option. So even though the front group does start moving away a little bit, we've got enough people and a bit of a kind of semi-chase pack developing. I know that I don't have to like kick super hard to try and catch what is effectively now a group of little Tron bikes as they disappear off. We are not out of touch with them just yet, so cheeky little fast forward as we come into the final breakaway bray for the evening. This one we do in 53 seconds, so 3 seconds faster than the previous 2 times that we did it, and I averaged 387 watts. So into breakaway bray, like this is just do or die. Obviously you can see that on the mini map top right, we've dropped a few riders. I'm at the back of the group. I'm kind of fighting for my life, but still, sat in 50 first, which is like, I'm really happy out of 200 odd riders to kind of be in that position. Not near the front, but I have saved my power up, so I drop that and then try and I'm right at the back there, right? Look at me. Anyway, put my dig in, right? I'm like, okay, this is do or die. Like, I can probably pick up a few places. So I kick through. On Zwift Power, guys, I come away with, I think it's like 33rd position in 31.22 seconds. There's my little kick. Take a few places off people and just like snipe them at the line. And that's about it. So even though on the Academy it says 40, I came in 33rd. So that's it for me tonight, guys. I will see you guys at a race again soon.